I think one of the things that I really want to talk about is not necessarily the specific words to use in a life book, but why we're using a life book, how it can help our kids, and how we can use the tool to really meet the needs of the specific child that we have that's come to us. Because each child is going to have a different need in what they're doing. You can't go say, oh, I've got Beth O'Malley's book and it's got, here's pages 1 through 20. I just fill in the blank. Oh, I'm done. This is great. I hate to break it to you guys, but it's got to be more personal than that. And you don't know when your baby is 2 weeks old or 6 months old. You don't know yet how they're going to be processing their adoption. So generally, what I've discovered, life books have been around for about 20 to 30 years. They primarily were done for social workers in foster care. So what a social worker would do is they would basically keep track of the movements and placement that a child had had. So they would be the ones gathering information, and they would be the ones sort of as a little caretaker of little pieces of your child's story. And then when the child went to a final placement, which was an adoptive placement, the book would follow them. So that really is how life books started. It wasn't until, I think Beth O'Malley is probably the first person to have dealt with life books. And what she did in the early 90s is she was a new social worker like you, and her first project was making a life book. And she discovered as she was working through these things with 4, 5, and 6-year-old kids that it triggered a lot of her feelings as an adoptee, which made her really go back and look at what she was doing in a life book and how it was working and how it could be used as a tool. So I think Beth is probably one of the really instrumental people in using the life book as a tool, not just as a repository of information, because it's so much more than that. Narratives are really important for kids to understand their stories. I mean, we tell stories all the time. We tell stories about what we did last week, or what Grandma and Grandpa used to do, or anything like that. And this is really a narrative of who they are. What we get to also include in this, which I think is really powerful, is the how you feel. And as Joni said, when a child is 3 or 2, they process things at a very different level than they do at 6 or 7, or they do at 12 or 13. And the life book is not a static tool. It's not something, I hate to break this to you, I always say this in my talks too, is you don't get to make just one. Right. So basically, as Jody said, it is a building block, it's a foundation. And the first life book that you do is going to be one that will help you. That's the first step. You as a parent who's practicing, who's getting used to the words, because we're not programmed to talk about adoption and to talk about loss and to deal with grief in a small child. That's something that we have to learn how to do. And we also, a lot of times, have to get past the feelings that we've got for how we were parented. So you've got a whole bunch of, a mix of emotions and stuff that are just jumbled together, and they all come out when you're doing this life book. So it's an interesting time, and if you're thoughtful and you allow yourself to have the feelings and to understand how this makes you feel. I mean, you're looking at this beautiful baby or this little toddler, and you love this child more than anything, but somebody gave this child away. And that's very hard for us as parents to get our arms around. And that's probably the biggest stumbling block that I see in people doing life books, is that they don't